Morning. Well, it's still just about morning. So last time I was here, I got 3 coats of epoxy on the keel. So the keel is now nice and sealed. That looks like it's gone off quite well. It's going to need to sand down, both on the front and the aft section. Oh, last time I also managed to get the additional pads that I cut on the back. So these are now glued onto the stern. So these two needs to be glued now onto the inside of the stern. So the idea is just to give the bolts more material to sit inside so that if there's any torsional effects, because the back is just 3/4 of an inch thick, and with the bolts through that, I thought there might be some torsional stress on that 3/4 inch piece of wood. So by doubling that up to 1.5 inches, hopefully that's going to distribute those torsional loads through the stern better and stop those bolts trying to kind of twist themselves out. Kind of my own idea, my own modification. Anyway, today it's about getting this rudder stock assembly finished off. So this is all now 3 coats of epoxy on the inside. Spacers glued on. The copper tube is in place, and I've rounded off the inside edges using the ring part of a ring spanner and hammering it. That worked quite well, a very small one. So that now goes all the way through. That's good. So today I'm just going to screw in these machine screws, which are countersunk heads, and I've put a countersink hole in, and that's had 3 coats of epoxy. So the idea is that that'll be what I attach the pintles to. So let's see how this goes. After lunch, I'm going to look at the centreboard. This needs to be, I've been planing this down, and I think I've done more on one side than the other. Yeah, this side is now planed all the way down to the central 1/16 of an inch piece of ply. This side has still got a little bit more to go, probably only a 1/16 of planing, and then I'm going to sand it and get it as smooth as possible because it's still very rough where it's been planed. So I'm going to carry on planing this side, and then it will all get sanded until it's nice and smooth. And then next time I'm here, this will get epoxy coated, and the bit that goes in the water will get sheathed with glass as well, with cloth. So that's it, yes. Oh, and also I'm going to finish drilling lots of holes in the stern. 8 holes for the gudgeons, 1 for the stopper, that's 9. And I'm also going to cut out some pads for the outboard. So when an outboard goes on there, there's going to be 2 sacrificial pads that will get screwed on. So I need 4 holes, 1 for each corner of the pads, internal and external. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drill holes all the way through and then tape over them and then backfill that with thickened epoxy. And then I'm going to countersink the holes in the right place and then paint it. And once it's painted, I can then screw everything back on, and it'll be screwing into glass rather than into wood. So that's the plan. So, all right, let's crack on then, see how much we can get done. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly show you the tiller and the rudder assembly as it currently stands. It's kind of, at the moment it's all dry fitted together. The only thing that's glued on is the spacer to one of the rudder cheeks. Everything else is just dry fitted. So this is the rudder stalk. It's just screwed together at the moment, although I have put the pintles on, which took a bit of doing, getting the right bolt length and everything, and then drilling. I had to actually drill out through the straps of the pintles as well, because these are American, and of course they came with the American size holes, and these are metric machine screws, metric bolts, so they are 5 mils. So the American size was just a tiny bit too small to get the bolts through, so I had to drill them ever so slightly. So that's the rudder blade. So that pivots on the pivot pin, which is just secured with a bolt and a washer on this side. I'll probably put 2 bolts on at the end of the day, but for now 1 will do. And that comes up. The idea is you pull it down, and there is a hole in the top of the rudder stock here, where a line can go down into the rudder blade, and then that pulls the blade into position while you're sailing. And how that attaches, so I've got the gudgeons now screwed on for the time being, just temporarily, onto the stern, just to get everything lined up. And I've also got a stopper. So the idea is that you put the bottom one in first, and that goes underneath the stopper, and then you can drop the top one in. And then there you are, that's the tiller. So the tiller turns the rudder stock, and that turns the rudder. So that will be held down in position by the line that comes through here. So I need to get a cleat for the top. So that's it. That is the rudder assembly. So the tiller needs to be cut down. That's too wide at the end here. That needs to be 1 inch. So I need to cut off these pieces and then smooth that all over. I started smoothing it here. It needs to be glued on. The second half of the rudder assembly hasn't been glued on yet, so that needs to be glued on. Then I can take these pads off, which is just holding it together with screws, and then it all needs to be coated with epoxy. It's coated on the inside, but not on the outside yet. And then the rudder blade needs coating, and I am going to glass that as well, because it's going to be in the water and may get worn if it hits things regularly. So there we go. Okay, quite pleased with that so far. Let's see if we can keep going. At the moment, these gudgeons are just screwed in position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill out a 10 millimeter diameter hole all the way through. I'm going to cover that over with tape and then backfill that with epoxy. So, and then I'm going to drill pilot holes, and then I'm going to screw it in with proper stainless steel screws, which I need to order, which I haven't ordered yet. So those screws will be going into epoxy, not wood, which is the right way to do it. So yeah, there's going to be 9 holes just for the gudgeons and the stopper. So those will need to be drilled through. And also I need to drill through and fill these 4 holes for the U-bolts as well. So that's another 4 and 9, that's 13 holes in total that I'm going to drill and fill after lunch. Right, I'm going to stop there for lunch and get cracking again this afternoon. Morning. Well, first thing I've done this morning when I've come in is just have a very quick look at the rudder stock to check how that has dried overnight, and I can see that the epoxy that's kind of seeping out here is very it's got a tiny bit of tackiness to the surface when I put my nail on it, but otherwise it's pretty rock hard, so it's a tiny bit sticky, so it's not fully cured yet, so it's not really ready for sanding, but I can take the clamps off, that's for sure. So this was all clamped up overnight. And I can also take these screws out. Oh, wow. Oh, maybe I can't. Yeah, maybe some of these screws have got... Oh, yeah. You heard that one crack. That was the epoxy that had got into the screw, breaking away. Oh, God. Stuck there. Oh, there we are. So that's the reason we put tape on the pads, is to stop any epoxy that comes out through the screw holes getting onto the wooden pad and making it stick, because it'd be very difficult to get off. So there we go. That's the rudder stock now in its final position. So the things left to do with this, obviously it's going to need all sanding down till it's smooth, 3 coats of epoxy. There are some shall we say construction bumps and curves which need to go, so that's all going to get sanded off. And then these 3 of these holes need epoxy inside. So the question is, do I try and do that with a tiny paintbrush, or better, do I drill them out bigger and then backfill them all the way through with epoxy so there's no exposed wood, but that means re-drilling the holes. So I need to know exactly where the holes are now, so that when I re-drill them, it's in the right place, in the same place. So I think what I'll do is I'm just going to take a pencil and I'm going to put crosshairs on both sides, and then what I'll do is I'll drill from this side and I'll also drill from that side and kind of hope they meet in the middle, because the important thing is to get the hole in the right point on the outside for the pintles, to get them accurately set. Because when I've bent them, they haven't bent 100% symmetrically, so the holes aren't exactly... So those ones are slightly out of line. Oh dear, yeah, well... Pros and cons of self-building. Then I can put the pintles on for good. I need to put the tiller on as well, that needs gluing on, so potentially I can get the tiller mounted and I can epoxy the whole thing in one go. So that's the rudder stock. Yesterday I spent a lot of time sanding down the centreboard, so that's starting to look quite good now. It needs a bit more on the leading edge. It's not quite symmetrical yet, but I think it's getting there. I don't think it's going to win any awards, but hopefully it'll be functional. I think I'm getting into a big sanding phase now, so that's going to be sanded. That needs sanding, and I also need to sand the insides of both sections, so that I can start thinking about getting some paint on probably in a couple of weeks. So the rudder's good to go. The centreboard's nearly ready. The rudder stock is getting close. The tiller needs work, and then everything needs sanding down. So I think I need to crack on with the sanding today, because that way, if I find any imperfections, if I find any things that I just can't live with, then I can put some thickened epoxy on with micro balloons, some fairing compound basically, so I can get that faired, and then next time I can sand it again and it'll be a lot smoother, better. So yeah, I need to sort of just sand everything down until I'm happy with the finish, the surface level, and put some fairing compound in anywhere that I'm not happy. And then the time after that, I can start thinking about the primer, which is going to involve getting this whole place cleaned out, washed down, get all this dust out. I don't want any dust in here at all. Yeah, I can start to see an end to the project. It's starting to get into the details now. The next thing I think that I can foresee will be the sailing fittings. So I need to take those off the laser and get them on here. All right, let's get going. Okay, so that's the end of another session. I've got these aft pads now glued on both sides, and I've filled the holes with thickened epoxy. The rudder is now all sanded, and I've just been widening the holes for the bolts for the pintles. Those have now also been filled up with epoxy. I'm also making a little kind of sacrificial pad to go on the transom here, where the outboard will attach, and of course that needs 4 holes as well, so I can screw that on. So I've got 4 holes for the top gudgeon, 4 holes for the bottom gudgeon, 1 for the stopper, and another 4 for the sacrificial pad. And these holes are drilled all the way through, and then they're back filled with thickened epoxy. And then same with these U-bolt 2 holes. They're drilled all the way through and then backfilled with thickened epoxy. The idea being that you can screw into that without compromising the wood, without letting water into the wood. So I've also started sanding the inside of the forward section. I've done about half. It's quite hard work, and most of it has to be done by hand, so it is tiring and quite warm. And I've also now got the tiller in pretty close to complete. I think that just needs to be glued on now to the rudder stock once that's dried out. Once this forward section is all sanded, I can think about putting a primer on it, and then I need to start thinking about sanding this aft section as well. I've also got the seat, the rudder and the centreboard, all of which need to be coated with 3 coats of epoxy, and the rudder and the daggerboard I'm going to actually sheathe in glass as well. So that's it. Yeah, I'm just about to wrap up. So once again, thanks for watching. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe, click the bell, and leave a comment down below. All right, cheers. See you next time.